Hello, welcome to my channel. Subscribe.
I turned 60 this spring, which is a strange age to feel both invisible and all too seen. My name is Jack. I've built houses in the Piedmont of North Carolina for 38 years, crawl spaces in August heat, roofs under January wind, porches that end up holding babies and Christmas lights and the smell of wet dogs after a storm. I like wood because it tells the truth if you listen. A beam bows where it's weak. A joy squeals when you step wrong. With people, weakness hides, and sometimes the squeal doesn't come until you're already falling. My wife, ex-wife, now is Carol. She used to be the kind of woman who could juggle 3 casseroles, a PTA meeting, and my lost socket wrench without breaking stride. She'd kiss my cheek when I came home smelling like tar paper and sawdust and say, "Go wash up, dinner'll get cold." And every bit of that was love. We had our son, Daniel, late 34 and 36 so. We were older parents in a sea of yoga pants and youth soccer. Maybe that kept us steady. Maybe it kept us tired. Either way, he grew up decent. He lives 2 hours away now, fixing airplanes, which feels like a promotion from fixing houses. Last summer, after 3 decades of steady, Carol joined a book club. That's not how the story begins, if I'm honest. If I'm honest, the story begins the day I realized we'd been eating dinner in silence for 5 months and calling it peace. The day I looked up and saw her smiling at a text that didn't come from me. The day her phone went from charging on the kitchen counter to sleeping under her pillow like a secret. But we like clean starts, so I'll say it began with the book club, 7 women from church, and from a yoga class I didn't know she joined. Thursday nights at first, then sometimes Fridays if we run long. I teased her about weather. They were reading Tolstoy. She laughed. The laugh was different, lighter, like it was floating away from me. In the early weeks she brought home stories about unreliable narrators and a twist ending none of them saw coming. She dropped little things like, "Emily thinks the protagonist's husband is emotionally unavailable," and then look at me for a beat too long. I'd say something dumb like, "Well, the protagonist should build him a porch and see if that helps." She'd smile politely, which, if you've been married long enough, you know is worse than a frown. Then the logistics changed. The meeting moved from Mary Ellen's living room to rotating locations, which rotated, apparently, toward the highway. She started dressing in a way I remembered from our 30s lipstick that made her mouth look like a promise, a blouse with a little shimmer that caught the light even at 7 p.m. She said she wanted to feel like herself again. I didn't say which self. I wanted to be the kind of man who supports his wife feeling good. I also wanted to be the kind of man who didn't feel the ground shift when he kissed her at the door. And she turned so it landed on her cheek. The first hard thing was small. A scent. Not perfume, not wine soap. Hotel soap has a particular smell, like cleanliness faking luxury. She came home at 10:30 and hugged me, and the scent hit my nose and time slowed. For a second, I was back in the Hampton Inn in Hickory during a roofing convention 5 years ago, washing my hands before a banquet. I asked how the book ended. She said, messily, and went to shower off a scent I already noticed. I told myself stories. Every betrayed person becomes a novelist. Maybe her friend Emily's husband got drunk and needed a ride to the Holiday Inn. Maybe they had a little reading retreat and got rooms to be safe driving at night. Maybe the hotel hosted a literacy fundraiser. Every maybe was a plank. I laid over a hole in the floor so I wouldn't look down. 2 Thursdays later, I was at the supply yard late. The kind of late that comes when a client decides he needs a cedar privacy fence before his mother-in-law visits. Rain started in sheets, and the highway glistened like black glass. I took the exit by the Sheraton because traffic was backed up and cut through the parking lot. Carol's car was there, a silver Camry with the chunk missing from the rear bumper where she'd side-kissed our mailbox. The dent is like a birthmark. You don't mistake it, I parked at the gas station across the street. I told myself I'd get a coffee and leave. Instead, I watched raindrops drum the hood until my heartbeat slowed. At 9:18, the lobby doors opened, and Carol stepped out with a man I'd never seen. Golfing magazine handsome, gray at the temples, the kind of posture that says he's had an office with a door for 30 years. He had an umbrella. He tilted it toward her. She tilted her face up and kissed him with the patience of a person who believes there will be more. I didn't take a picture. I didn't throw up. I just sat there and learned what silence sounds. Like in your ribs. I drove home. I didn't confront. I took a long shower so hot my back stung. When she came in, she was light, liquid. "Hey, hon," the voice she used to use when the day had gone well. I said the first lie. "Get anything? Good from the library?" She smiled and slid past me like a dancer in a narrow hallway. The next morning, I called Rick, and I once got detention for rewiring the principal's office intercom so it played AM radio. He became a cop, then a private investigator when the city pension got weird. He's good, which means he's quiet. I said, hypothetically, and he said, cut the hypotheticals, Jack. I told him about the hotel, about the umbrella. He didn't say the word affair. He said, "You want certainty?" I said yes. He said, "Give me a week." He gave me 5 days. He sent a link with a password that opened a folder, and inside the folder were my insides. Photos of Carol and the man Thomas leaving 2 hotels, Sheraton and a cheaper place off I-85, entering a steakhouse, standing too close to each other at a grocery store in the next county, looking at cantaloupes. Like they were making a decision about planets. A video taken from a boring position across a diner. Carol's hand touches Thomas's wrist. And there's a millisecond where you can see the whole inside joke of a relationship. Shared language. Friction smoothed by heat. "Thomas Whitaker?" Rick said on the phone. Voice neutral. 55. Owns a flooring company. Married. No kids. Wife's name is Lorraine. She has a good job at a bank and is a bit scarier than he is. He cleared his throat. "Sorry, pal." I said I'd expected it. He said no one expects it. He told me to sit with it and not to do anything that'd make a judge look at me like a problem. The second call I made was to a lawyer. If you're reading this from North Carolina, you know what's coming. We are one of a handful of states where you can sue your spouse's lover for alienation of affection and criminal conversation, the legal term for sleeping with a married person. It's an old law from when judges wore different hats, but it's still on the books, and sometimes it still matters. I didn't want to be a man who ate his heart while the man who helped himself to my life kept golfing. I wanted the law to say out loud what had happened. My lawyer, Ms. Patel, is 40 and surgical. She looked at the photos and leaned back in her chair. "Jack, if you want to sue him, we can build a case. You have 3 elements for alienation: a genuine marital relationship that included love and affection, your long marriage, your public life together, wrongful conduct by a third party, these photos, the timeline, and a causal connection between his conduct and the alienation of her affection." She tapped the folder. "The texts will help. We'll get those in discovery. For criminal conversation, the bar is even lower. Proof of sexual intercourse during the marriage. The hotel records will help. So will any receipts, any witness who saw them enter a room. Your pie can testify. You good with the attention?" I said I'd build a fence around my shame if it meant I could keep what mattered. She nodded slowly. "Okay, we also talked divorce. North Carolina requires a year of separation before you can file absolute divorce. You can, however, file for post-separation support and equitable distribution, and you can protect assets, which Ms. Patel did, like she was wrapping heirlooms in bubble wrap. We froze joint lines of credit. We moved my business accounts to separate tax ID. She told me to remain calm, remain in the house, remain steady. Judges reward steady, she said. And juries like honest men who build things. There are 2 versions of me the next 3 weeks. There's the man who eats toast in the morning with his wife in the same kitchen and asks her how the book club is going. And there's the man who sits in his truck in the Home Depot parking lot, staring at his hands and saying, "Don't blow it up today." I never knew I had that second man inside me. He was useful. He held back the first man from making a speech that would feel great and ruin the plan. I started looking backward for the moment the thread pulled loose. The black dress she bought last fall for Mary Ellen's daughter's wedding. The group text from the club. She once left open only 4 names in it, 2 not from our church. Her sudden interest in golf when she'd spent 30 years making fun of polo shirts. The night she said, "Do you ever feel like we hit pause and forgot where the play button is?" And I said something about the remote being under the cushion. And she looked at me like she'd tossed me a lifeline and I'd hung a plan on it. I confronted her on a Sunday afternoon when the house smelled like lemon oil and the game was low on TV. I didn't plan the timing. It came out like truth often does after a silence too long to ignore. "I know," I said. I didn't say what. She knew what. The way her face changed, shock, calculation, softness, made me feel both stupid and old. She sat down at the kitchen table and folded her hands like she was about to say grace. "Jack," she said, and then she said nothing. I slid the folder across the table. She looked, and when she hit the video from the diner, her throat moved. "It's not," she began. I put my finger on the table. "Please don't insult me." We stared at the wood grain. Finally, she said, "I never wanted to hurt you." The kind of sentence people say when they've been hurting you for months and only just noticed. I asked how long. She said, "A few months." I said, "Which is Carol for 6 to 9. She didn't argue. I asked how it started. She said at a fundraiser for the Literacy Council. So there was a fundraiser after all, where Thomas ran the silent auction and she registered donors and he helped her move a box and then he helped her move. A story in her head where she was seen and knew. I asked if she loved him. She stared at the salt shaker. "I love what I felt with him," she said. "It made me feel 25 again." I said, 25-year-old me would like a word with you. Then I said the hard things so the room would stop spinning. "We're done." She cried the way you cry when you realize the brakes won't catch. "We can fix this," she said weakly. "Counseling, or time, or something." I said I believed counsel and time were good for people who hadn't signed into a motel under a false last name. We talked logistics because logistics are what you talk about when you can't talk about pain. She offered to sleep in the guest room. I said yes. She asked to keep it quiet until we told Daniel. I said we'd tell him together and that we'd tell the truth. She flinched. "Can't we say we've grown apart?" I said that's true but not sufficient. She said she was afraid he'd hate her. I said he might be disappointed, and that's worse and also survivable. Then we sat with mugs we didn't drink from. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy served Thomas the lawsuit at his office, and Miss Patel filed my claims. The news did not stay private long. His wife, Lorraine, called me that night, voice steady like she was reading from a manual that said, "How to address the man whose wife slept with your husband." She said, "Mr. Harper, I got your number from the court filing. I'd like to coordinate so we don't make each other's lives harder." I said, "Thank you," and realized I was talking to the only other person on earth who understood the shape of the hole in my house. We didn't become friends. We became weather forecasters, texting storm updates when one of us heard thunder. Telling Daniel was the worst thing I've ever done. We drove to his townhouse. He grilled chicken because men in our line do manual tasks when the room tilts. Carol started to talk and then couldn't. I told him. He stared into the middle distance where you keep your childhood and your father's. Hands and the sound of your mother laughing at your first bad joke. He said, "Okay," like a man whose plane just lost an engine says, "Okay." Then he turned to his mother and asked quietly, "Why?" She started the standard explanations. Lonely, invisible, we drift. And he held up a palm. "Why with him?" He asked. She said Thomas made her feel alive. Daniel looked at me the way sons look at fathers when they realize you are both mortal and still trying. "What do you want me to do, Dad?" I said, "Be kind, but keep your eyes open." On the drive home, Carol stared out the window and said, "He'll never see me the same." I said, "Neither will I." The year of separation stretched out. Like bad road. Carol stayed in the guest room. We divided chores like roommates. Some evenings, I heard her cry. Some evenings, I went to the shop and swept a floor that didn't need sweeping. We developed a script for public. Carol's with the book club. Jack's got a big project. People in a small town know when a script is a script. I got nods from men who'd walked this path. I got pies from women who never liked me but liked being useful. I also got silence from some who didn't know which of us to back and chose neutral. The lawsuit moved. Thomas tried to get it dismissed. The judge said no. Discovery began. Ms. Patel sat with me at a conference table while they read aloud text messages between two people I used to know. My wife had written things I didn't think she knew how to write anymore. Thomas wrote like a teenager with a thesaurus, which would be funny if it weren't my life. The day they read the thread where Carol told him she felt guilty but lit. Up, I excused myself and threw up in a sink. Miss Patel knocked on the door and said, "Breathe, Jack," like I'd forgotten the mechanics. There's a deposition where words are weapons, and there's the drive home, where the air is clay. After one of those long days, I stopped at the diner where we used to get pancakes after Daniel's Little League games. The waitress, a woman who's seen 40 years of secrets pass with the syrup, set down coffee without asking and said, "You hanging in?" I nodded. She touched my shoulder with 2 fingers, and it was the kindest thing anyone had done for me that week. Lorraine filed for divorce. When someone asked me if I felt bad for Thomas's wife, I said, every day. When someone asked if I felt bad for Thomas, I said, less than that. Carol kept seeing him for a while, then stopped, then started again, the way people do. When the thing that harms them also convinces them it's where the light is. She told me once, it's like standing at the edge of a pool, the shock, the rush, the feeling. And then you're cold and ashamed, and you climb out, and then you forget the cold and remember the rush, and you jump again. I said, some pools are cholera, which is not poetic but is accurate. At church. Yes. I kept going. The pastor preached a sermon about mercy that included a story about a stone and a hand. 2 people hugged Carol in the lobby. 3 hugged. Emmy. 1 man shook my hand and said, "Hit him where it hurts." I didn't feel proud of that. I also didn't feel like preaching. Mediation for the property part of our separation was strange theater. Carol's attorney, a man who said, "Folks," a lot like it was a charm, suggested she keep the house. I felt the room tilt. Ms. Patel slid a paper across the table. Comparables, equity, my business cash flow. "House is marital," she said calmly. "We'll sell and split. Or he'll buy out her half at appraisal minus deferred maintenance and the roof that needs replacing." The mediator nodded like he'd seen this movie. Carol stared at a water stain on the ceiling tile as if it contained a clue. We took a break. In the hallway, she said, "Could we slow down?" I said, "We spent the slow down last year. Now we're moving." She closed her eyes and nodded. The house sold in November. I packed tools I hadn't used in years and found the construction paper turkey Daniel made in 2nd grade and sat on the floor with it until my back hurt. Carol. packed our wedding china, and cried over a cracked gravy boat neither of us remembered using. We fought, once, like amateurs, about who got the good Dutch oven, then laughed. And then that made us cry again because laughing together felt like cheating on the divorce. On closing day, we signed papers under fluorescent light that made everything look unborn. The title clerk gave us 2 pence, as if we might need one each to carve a life in half. The alienation case set for trial after Christmas. Thomas's attorney, a man with cufflinks like coins, tried to paint our marriage as an empty barn. Ms. Patel put me on the stand and asked about the small things: coffee, Friday Chinese, the porch we built together. She asked our neighbor of 25 years whether she'd ever seen affection between us. The neighbor said, every Saturday morning for 30 years. I saw him bring her the paper with the funny pages on top because she liked to start light. The jury's faces softened. Patel introduced the hotel receipts, the photographs, the messages. She asked me what I'd lost. I said, a story I lived in. The courtroom was quiet, the kind that makes you aware of how loud your heart is. In his closing, Thomas's lawyer said money can't fix a marriage. In hers, Ms. Patel said money can mark a wrong and give a man back some of what was taken. The jury took 3 hours. Their verdict gave me a number that won't buy back any mornings, but will pay for quiet in a house that's mine. After the verdict, I walked to the parking lot and saw Thomas standing by his car, jaw tight. He said, "You embarrassed me." I said, "You embarrassed yourself." He said, "She came to me." I said, "And you opened the door." He took a step like he might do something. I squared my shoulders the way a carpenter does before lifting a beam, not to prove anything, just to avoid getting crushed. He stopped. Lorraine walked past him without looking and shook my hand. "Well done," she said with the steadiness of a woman who keeps a bank and a life in balance. The rest is the boring kind of hard that doesn't show up in movies. I rented an apartment over a barber shop and learned the names of the men who show up at 7 a.m. for a shave because their wives are gone. I found a small 2-bedroom ranch out near where the soy fields start, bought it with cash from the verdict and the house sale, and painted the living room a color called soft clay that looks better in sunlight. I put up a fence. My muscles know how to do that even when my brain doesn't. I bought a dog, a brown mutt with a stand-up ear and a torn ear. Named him Copper because I'm predictable, and woke up every morning to a being whose love is uncomplicated. Carol moved into a condo near the Greenway. She stopped seeing Thomas when it became clear he liked winning more than loving. She sent an apology a month later, the kind you can only write when the adrenaline burns off. It said, "I'm sorry I threw a grenade into the safest room in our house." I took that metaphor and turned it until it clicked. I wrote back, "I'm sorry I didn't hear the pin when it first pulled." We met once at a coffee shop we never used to go to and talked like people exchanging a tool in a driveway. She said she felt like she'd woken up from a story where she was the heroine and realized she'd been an extra with good lighting. I said I was learning to live with fewer mirrors. Daniel came most Sundays. We fix small things that hinge on my gate, the leaky faucet. He doesn't say much about the divorce because he's my son and because he saw enough in those depositions to last a lifetime. He hugged his mother on holidays. He hugged me on ordinary days. He started calling more, and I pretended I didn't notice the frequency chart. I didn't date for a long time. Then I met a woman at a salvage yard while I was looking for heart. Pine. She was there for stained glass. We talked about old things that were still worth saving. We've had coffee twice. I'm not writing a new book yet. I'm just writing sentences and seeing if they add up to a chapter. You want the revenge? People always ask, beneath all the concern. The revenge is that I kept my dignity when it would have felt holy to lose it. The revenge is that the truth sat on a table where people who hand down verdicts saw it and said, "This mattered." The revenge is that my house is quiet and my dog sleeps with his head on my boot, and I built the fence with posts sunk straight. And true, and when the wind blows, it holds. One night in early spring, months after the verdict, I went to a high school baseball game because one of my crew's kids was pitching. The same bleachers, the same smell of cut grass and boiled peanuts. A woman 2 rows down recognized me and patted the seat next to her. "How you really doing?" she asked, and I surprised myself by telling the truth. "Better than I should be," I said, "and worse than I make it look." She nodded. "That's most of us," she said. "We just don't get the lawsuit." I still wake up some nights with the image of Carol laughing at a text that wasn't mine. It no longer makes me shake. It makes me feel like I missed something I could have caught if I'd been younger or better or less tired. Then Copper sighs and throws his weight against my shin like a sandbag. And I remember that love is not a riddle to solve so much as a way of standing when the water rises dot on my 60th birthday. My crew put a neon orange bow on a Milwaukee drill and made a joke about me finally joining the modern world. We ate barbecue on sawhorses, and someone said, "Speech," and I said, "I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a man was his wife leaving him. Turns out the worst thing is thinking you stopped being worth staying for." Then I said, "The best thing is finding out you still are, even if the person who sees it first is your dog." We laughed because men don't know what else to do when we're telling the truth in public. After, I went home and sat on my porch and watched a thunderstorm roll in from the west. The sky went that color of bruised steel that makes you brace. The lawn chairs. The first fat drops hit the steps, and I closed my eyes and listened. Wood tells the truth if you listen. So do storms. So do we, eventually, if we're lucky and stubborn. If you're reading this because you're where I was staring. At a hotel lobby across a wet parking lot, do the steady thing. It's not loud. It won't impress the friends who want to hand you a bat. But it will keep you whole enough to swing a hammer tomorrow. Gather proof. Protect yourself. Tell the truth in the rooms where truth matters. Let the law till the ground. Where it can. Plant something new in the dirt that's left. It will grow. Not the same, not with the old shade, but it will grow. And one day, when you catch a whiff of hotel soap in a perfectly innocent place, it won't send you to your knees. It'll just make you check your pockets for the key to the house you built yourself and smile when you find it right where you left it.